I would love it one day when my job doesn't exist, because that means that organizations have changed and mental health and well-being is no longer something that we need to work on, because it happens as part of the culture and the policies and the processes and the way that we do business. I got into positive psychology, and in particular trauma-informed coaching, through my own lived experience. I'd had a number of adverse life events from childhood. I lost a parent quite young, and growing up, and different things playing out for me in my personal life. And it was actually through my own experience of mental ill health. I was diagnosed with several anxiety disorders, panic disorder and generalized anxiety disorder. And then much later, I was diagnosed with ADHD. And I didn't cope particularly well in the early days of my recovery. And that has been a journey over the last 9 years now. And it was through wanting to learn more about the brain, wanting to learn more about mental health, but in particularly how I could support other people so they didn't have to go through what I went through, or that they could be supported themselves. And that's when I discovered positive psychology, and it resonated so much with me, not only about mindset and the holistic approaches to well-being and the foundations of well-being, but also how positive psychology at that point was going through its second wave, as it's called in academia. And it was very much focused about resilience, how you navigate difficult life experiences and come through the other side changed, and having grown from that experience. And then from there, once I completed my MSc, I was working in spaces as a coach where I was really going into those sessions with open eyes that these people were coming with a form of trauma, because I was coaching women who had experienced domestic abuse and violence, which was also part of my own lived experience. I was coaching humanitarian aid workers who are out in the field supporting refugee communities who are seeing terrible and horrific actions and scenarios and situations being played out. And I felt the need to be equipped to hold space, but in a way that was not going to re-traumatize them, and to be really mindful about that line between coaching and therapy. It's really helped inform not only the work that I do in the coaching space, but also within organizations as well, because we've all got life experience, difficult life experiences that we navigate. And sometimes I feel that we're not as careful around being respectful of people's experiences, and also how we might be inadvertently pushing them backwards into their own kind of darker spaces, rather than encouraging them to move forward. So for me, it was definitely something that really helped my own experience as well, and I've learned lots for myself. I've met wellbeing practitioners who don't have the academic underpinning, and I've also met academics that haven't got the practical experience. And I think that I come from a three-pronged approach, really. And in academia, we're called pracademics for those who are practitioners, but have also got the academic qualifications and rigor behind them. I wanted to make sure that what I was teaching, whether that be in a workshop or a webinar, or talking about in a keynote, or if I was offering solutions or interventions to coaching clients, they were informed by evidence-based practice or science. So for me, it was really important to undertake my MSc because that was very thorough and also gave me an opportunity to dive deeper into my own area of expertise. And I don't claim to be an expert in all things mental health because that would be impossible. I think the practical experience has allowed me to really work with fascinating and really interesting groups and populations of people. And I've worked a lot with marginalized groups as well, where coaching would not be considered an intervention for them or would not have been offered, or it's a privilege to be able to access a talking intervention like coaching. So that I think has really stood me in good stead to bring so many different lenses and perspectives to, for example, a corporate organization, when I have actually also been out in the field coaching humanitarian aid workers. And I've been working in a favela in the southern hemisphere in Brazil, in Rio, or I've spent time working with women who are going through really difficult and traumatic experiences where they're still having to see their perpetrator, their partner, if they have children, and I'm coaching them. So I feel that those lenses that I have give me such a different perspective, and it's not one dimensional, and it's really shaped my frame of reference, which I think is so important, because the more experiences we have, our frame of reference grows. And also, my lived experience is important because it is what has brought me to this space. But I'm also mindful that is my own experience. But I find that when I do share that, and I write regularly about what's happening in my world or in my head, that I always receive emails, direct messages, comments, people saying that really resonated for me, that made me feel seen. Your journey's different to mine, but that feels like something that I could do. And I think that helps people to then know that you are also human. You are not some superhero, perfect wellness, well-being academic who never gets anything wrong, never fails, never gets hurt, never has awful bad times either. And I think that's really important, that people see the real human as well. I've always been fascinated using breathwork techniques because of my panic attacks with panic disorder. And I've had panic attacks since I was 19, so several decades now. And I found them really helpful for calming myself down. And then I started using them with clients in the coaching space, particularly where I work a lot with clients who do experience forms of anxiety, but just more broadly, how we navigate everyday life and the stresses that we're constantly surrounded by, that having this amazing, powerful tool that sits within us is just there to access, and it can really, really help us. Then last year, I went and certified as a transformational breathwork leader, particularly focusing on what's called conscious connected breathing, which is where you breathe rapidly through the mouth and it creates an emotional, it can create an emotional release in the body. And we know now so much around trauma that it can be stored and locked in parts of the body if we think of ourselves as an energetic being. And I've witnessed some incredible experiences where people have had the breath work and it's really impacted on them and their move towards healing. Breathwork's really powerful for people when they are really struggling, but they don't know how to talk about it, or they don't want to talk about it anymore. They can't find the language or the vocabulary to talk about how they're feeling. And the breath pushes that energy through the body. And since then, I've started doing different types of breathwork techniques as well. And I'm finding that clients just love that they can use this tool wherever they are. They don't need a fancy gym outfit. They don't need to pay anything for it. They can just sit there and use these techniques, whether they're standing up, lying down. And it's incredible, really, to think that we have this, but we don't tend to use it. So yeah, it's been a really powerful addition to my toolkit with working with my coaching clients. My research into coaching and post-traumatic growth was quite ahead of its time when it was published, because I'd been working on it for several years and the pandemic happened, so it delayed the publication, and it was published finally in 2023. There is a real argument and the demarcation between what's coaching and what's therapy, and there is a real grey area around where those two meet. And for someone like me as a coach who is trained in mental health first aid, who's a grief first aider, who's been on lots of grief and PTSD courses led by clinical psychologists, and trauma informed coaching practice as well. I definitely probably have, I describe more broader shoulders than perhaps a different type of coach who doesn't necessarily want to have those types of conversations with their clients, and it's may feel that it's not necessary to do that. The way that I describe it is that I'm not working on someone's trauma, I'm working with it. So it's acknowledging it, knowing that it's there, but also that isn't the focus of why they come to the coaching space. The research showed that lots of coaches are working with people who've had experienced trauma in some sense of the word, and trauma is really in the eye of the beholder. We can think of bullying at work as traumatic. We can think of a car accident as traumatic. We can think of being in a war zone as traumatic. It comes in many, many different shapes and forms. And sometimes it can be really discreet and subtle. For example, like somebody who is bullying you at work, it might be very small, but eventually it will have such a huge impact on that individual. And for me, it was really powerful to see that coaches were in the coaching space, but also navigating through what is what can be quite traumatic for a client. And this is where I really think we need to have more rigor in the coaching world. There is not a regulation. There are several governing bodies when it comes to coaching, but you don't have to be licensed like you would do if you were a therapist or a counsellor. So I do think there's definitely more education and awareness for coaches to operate, because you could unintentionally at times as well be doing more harm than good to your client, and that's not going to be helpful. So yeah, it's been really helpful to recognize that post-traumatic growth, the idea of growing on the back of an adverse life experience, can really be supported by coaching. It could be part of the process, but it could also be the outcome. I'd spent over 18 years or so working in corporates before I moved into running my own business and working in the wellbeing and coaching space. And I worked for big industries like aerospace, investment banking, wealth management, recruitment, and inclusion and diversity. And so I have a very, I suppose, a very very much a wealth of knowledge around how corporates work, particularly high performing cultures. This is what I think has really helped assist me to work in organizations when it comes to wellbeing, because I really appreciate the demands and pressures that's placed on leaders and managers, and also on employees as well. So that really helps for me to not stand in front of a training or a workshop and be telling people, well, you need to log off at 5 o'clock if they're in a law firm, for example, and a client's calling them at 10 o'clock at night and demands X, Y, and Z. It can be really tricky scenario to navigate, and it really it really comes down to company culture, which I spend a lot of time with organizations working on as well. The work that I tend to do in organizations, I see all those people as change agents, because we all have an opportunity to influence and shape the culture of where we work, even if it's in a small space and within a small team. With my coaching skills, I'm able to work in a room, I'm able to facilitate well, recognizing different needs in that room, recognizing that everybody wants to learn and navigates the learning process completely different. As somebody who's neurodivergent, I'm very mindful of asking people to sit all day for 7 hours when they're in a training, or 4 hours when I myself can't even do that. So I think there's a real gift, I believe, because the feedback I always get on my facilitator sessions is that people feel safe, they feel that they can open up, they feel that they can share or ask questions without feeling judged, or there is not always a right or wrong, which, to be fair, in the mental health and wellbeing space, there isn't. There is so much nuance and complexity. And I want everyone to feel that they are included. And when you have a group of 16 or 20 people in a workshop, that really takes your energy as a facilitator to ensure that happens and encourage people, that they don't feel also pushed. But I'm also the same as a coach. I also challenge and respectfully challenge, and also feel that people can, where they can edge into their stretch zone, so they don't always sit in their comfort, but they can do that in a way that feels safe for them. I'm currently writing a book at the moment around post-traumatic growth, a self-help book, I suppose. And I really want that to be out in the world, because so many people have asked me for when are you going to write something that I can take away and learn. So that's a real hope of mine, an aspiration. I I would love it one day when my job doesn't exist, because that means that organizations have changed and mental health and well-being is no longer something that we need to work on, because it happens as part of the culture and the policies and the processes and the way that we do business. I don't know if that's probably going to happen in my lifetime. So I hope to see more of a holistic approach to mental health and well-being in organizations. I hope to see that it isn't seen as something that you do once a year on October the 10th or for a week in May. I think it has to be part of the everyday. And I also want organizations to consider that the fact that while we still have people, we're not all AI yet, that we still need those people to be supported. We need to make sure people are thriving as well. So for me, they're kind of my hopes and aspirations. And I'd also really love to do something around music and mental health, and I'm doing some work at the moment with an acting company on mental health as well. So I love the creative process, because I feel that people learn so much more, they can engage with the topics on a level that really resonates for them, and it's not just a webinar or a training. So different ways of communicating and allowing people to build awareness, but at the same time experiencing something that's sensory, is really powerful. If you come to one of my keynotes, I always get told that it's fun, which is, I know, a little bit weird considering some of the topics that I can talk about. And I always think there is something about the light and the dark. I have done a Funny Women stand-up comedy course, but I promise you I will keep my gags to a minimum. But I feel that people, they take something away that they never thought that they had heard about before or knew about the topics, whether that's mental health or more broadly well-being. I feel that people have fun. I feel that people are energized and also inspired to go and make some of that change. And when I finish a talk, I have people waiting to talk to me and to share their experience. So I feel there's a real connection. So even in a big group of people, that connection is still there. And I like to think that even in a big group, I can make that connection still one to one. And for me, that's the most important thing.